Nobody was ready for this one, because when Offset hit upload late at night with no caption, no warning, and comments limited, fans immediately knew something was off. No rollout, no promo, just a grainy clip that spread faster than anyone could delete it, allegedly showing Cardi B in a moment so raw that even longtime supporters felt uncomfortable watching. And then the rumor that detonated everything. The footage was posted after Offset found out about alleged cheating involving Stefon Diggs. Fans are shocked because this wasn't a diss track. It wasn't a subtweet. It wasn't a messy Instagram caption. It was visual, personal, and according to people who claimed they saw the original upload before it was taken down, the clip showed Cardi emotional, pacing, all and clearly unaware she was being recorded, sparking immediate backlash and questions about intent. Within minutes, timelines split in half. One side accused Offset of crossing a line, saying whatever happened behind closed doors should have stayed there. The other side claimed heartbreak makes people act out, especially when betrayal feels public and humiliating. Emotions ran high as fans replayed the footage frame by frame, trying to understand whether this was proof of pain or proof of manipulation. What made it worse? The timing. The post allegedly came hours after whispers about Cardi and Diggs exploded online. No confirmation, no denial, just silence. Followed by that video, people close to both camps started unfollowing each other. Old interviews resurfaced, lyrics got reinterpreted, and suddenly, on what looked like another celebrity rumor started feeling like the implosion of one of hip-hop's most watched relationships again. So the question everyone's asking is simple but uncomfortable. Was this a moment of heartbreak or a calculated move meant to expose? Either way, once footage goes public, there's no taking it back. The fallout didn't wait for explanations. Within minutes of the footage spreading, the internet began filling in gaps on its own, building narratives faster than anyone involved could respond. What people kept circling back to was the emotional state Cardi appeared to be in. This wasn't a glam clip, not a rant meant for fans, not even a heated argument meant to intimidate. It looked like exhaustion layered on top of hurt, the kind that comes from feeling blindsided rather than caught. That distinction mattered to viewers because it changed how they interpreted everything that followed. As the clip looped across platforms, fans started comparing it to past moments when Cardi B had chosen to be vulnerable on her own terms. In interviews, she's cried openly. On lives, she's addressed rumors head on. The difference this time was control, or the lack of it. This moment didn't feel chosen, and that's where the discomfort set in. Emotions ran high as people questioned whether pain shared without consent crosses an invisible line, even when both people involved are public figures. Speculation about motive grew louder. Some viewers believed Offset acted out of impulse, reacting emotionally after learning about alleged infidelity rather than thinking through the consequences. Others were less forgiving, odds of suggesting the post was a way to shape public perception before Cardi could speak. That theory gained traction because of the timing. Rumors about Stefon Diggs had only just started circulating when the video appeared. To many, it felt like a response without words, an attempt to let visuals imply what wasn't being said. Fans quickly split into camps. One side argued that heartbreak doesn't make you calculated, it makes you reckless. They pointed out how often people do things in moments of emotional overload that they regret later. The other side pushed back hard, saying recording and posting someone at their lowest isn't accidental, no matter how hurt you are. That divide turned comment sections into heated debates about accountability, privacy, and power in relationships that play out under a public microscope. What made everything more volatile was the lack of confirmation around the cheating rumors themselves. No screenshots, no names attached directly, just whispers growing louder with each repost. In that vacuum, the footage became evidence by default, even though it proved nothing on its own. Fans are shocked by how quickly assumption replaced fact, but that's how internet narratives often work. Emotion fills the gaps where information is missing. As the night went on, people started pulling up old interviews where Offset talked about trust, loyalty, and mistakes. Clips resurfaced of Cardi defending him in the past, standing by him publicly when it would have been easier to walk away. Those moments took on new meaning in the context of the video. Viewers weren't just reacting to the present, they were reliving the past through a harsher lens, and questioning whether old reconciliations were ever as solid as they seemed. At the same time, Cardi's silence became its own storyline. No posts, no responses, no indirect messages. That quiet, unsettled people almost as much as the footage itself. Some interpreted it as shock, others as strategy. A few believed it was simply self-preservation, choosing not to engage while emotions were still too raw. The absence of her voice allowed everyone else's to grow louder, filling timelines with opinions she never asked for. People close to both artists added fuel without saying much. Likes on certain comments, old photos disappearing from profiles, quotes about respect, betrayal, and boundaries popping up without names attached. Fans read into everything, convinced that each subtle move was a message. The family was left divided not just between Offset and Cardi, but between supporters who once celebrated them as a unit and now felt forced to pick sides. The alleged involvement of Stefon Diggs shifted the conversation again. Sports fans unfamiliar with Cardi and Offset's history entered the discussion confused and defensive, while hip-hop fans debated whether his name should have even been mentioned without proof. That crossover attention made the situation feel messier and harder to contain. It wasn't just relationship drama anymore. It was a collision of fan bases, each bringing their own biases and expectations. What stood out most in all the noise was how many people said the same thing in different ways. The footage felt invasive, not scandalous, not juicy, just invasive. Alta viewers described feeling like they were watching something they weren't meant to see, something that should have stayed between two people navigating pain privately. That reaction challenged the usual appetite for celebrity mess, suggesting that even in a culture built on exposure, there are moments people instinctively want to look away from. As hours turned into a full day, conversations became more reflective. People started asking why public relationships so often end in public humiliation rather than quiet separation, why pain gets weaponized instead of processed, why the internet rewards whoever speaks first, not whoever speaks truthfully. Those questions didn't have easy answers, but they lingered, reshaping how the footage was perceived. Some fans tried to reframe the situation, arguing that the clip showed how real the relationship still was, that if there was pain, it meant there was still care. Others rejected that idea entirely, saying love doesn't justify exposure. That disagreement wasn't just about this couple, it was about values, about whether vulnerability shared without consent is honesty or harm. Through all of this, neither Offset nor Cardi addressed the footage directly. That silence stretched the story further, allowing speculation to harden into belief for some viewers. In the absence of clarity, people chose narratives that matched their experiences. Those who'd been betrayed sided with Offset, those who'd felt exposed sided with Cardi. The situation became a mirror more than a mystery. By the end of the day, the video itself almost faded into the background, all replaced by the larger conversation it sparked, about boundaries, about emotional reactions in the age of instant sharing, about how quickly private pain becomes public currency. And even without confirmation of any rumors, one thing felt undeniable. Once that footage went live, something fragile broke. Not just trust between two people, but the illusion that everything shared online is fair game. The story didn't end there. It just settled into something heavier, waiting for the next move, the next response, the next piece of the puzzle that might clarify intentions or complicate them even more. As the conversation stretched into the next day, the tone online shifted from shock to scrutiny. People stopped replaying the clip for emotion and started replaying it for intent. Every pause, every off-camera sound, every moment Cardi looked away became something to interpret. Fans weren't just asking what happened, they were asking why this moment was chosen to be shared at all. And without answers from either side, speculation filled the silence. One theory that gained traction suggested the upload wasn't meant to stay public. Some believed it was posted impulsively, fueled by raw emotion, then quickly removed once reality set in. That idea softened opinions for a few viewers, framing the incident as a mistake rather than a move. But others pushed back, saying intention doesn't disappear just because regret follows. Once something that personal is shared, even briefly, the impact can't be undone. What complicated the narrative further was how quickly people began framing Cardi's emotional state as evidence of wrongdoing. That assumption sparked backlash. Supporters argued that distress doesn't equal guilt, especially when someone is dealing with public rumors and private conflict at the same time. Emotions ran high as women across the internet spoke up, pointing out how often vulnerability gets misread as admission rather than pain. At the same time, some fans argued that the footage showed honesty rather than exposure, that it stripped away PR polish and revealed the cost of living under constant scrutiny. That perspective didn't excuse the sharing, but it reframed the moment as a symptom of pressure rather than malice. The disagreement wasn't just about this situation, it was about how much access the public is entitled to when celebrities' lives unravel. As the debate grew louder, People began revisiting the history between Offset and Cardi B with renewed intensity. Past reconciliations were re-examined, public apologies replayed, old vows of change resurfaced. Fans questioned whether patterns were repeating or if this moment represented something fundamentally different. The past became a lens through which the present was judged. The alleged connection to Stefan Diggs added gasoline to the fire, not because of proof, but because of proximity. His name being linked, fairly or not, made the situation feel bigger than a relationship dispute. It pulled in sports commentary channels, gossip blogs, and reaction pages that had no stake in the couple's history. The result was a louder, messier conversation where nuance struggled to survive. Behind the scenes, fans watched for signals. Follow lists changed. On stories posted and deleted, lyrics shared that felt pointed without being explicit. None of it confirmed anything, but it fed the idea that something serious had shifted. People who once celebrated public displays of love now scrutinized the absence of them, reading meaning into what wasn't shown. What stood out during this phase was how many people expressed discomfort rather than excitement. This wasn't the usual celebrity drama people binge for entertainment. Many viewers said it felt too close to real life, too similar to arguments they'd witnessed or lived through themselves. That relatability made the footage harder to consume, blurring the line between spectator and participant. Some fans began calling for restraint, urging others to stop sharing the clip and let the people involved handle things privately. Fine, that call didn't fully work. Nothing ever truly disappears online, but it did shift the conversation. More people started asking whether continuing to circulate the video was helping anyone at all. The idea that attention could deepen harm gained traction. Meanwhile, critics of Offset questioned the power dynamics at play. They argued that sharing footage grants control over narrative, especially when the other person hasn't spoken yet. Supporters countered that silence can also be strategic and that waiting doesn't always mean being silenced. That back and forth highlighted a deeper tension about who gets believed first and why. As hours passed with no official word, theories hardened into camps. One side believed the footage was a raw expression of betrayal and hurt, mishandled but human. The other saw it as a boundary crossed, regardless of emotional context. Both sides claimed empathy, they just directed it differently. The family was left divided in public perception, even as the people involved remained quiet. What became impossible to ignore was how the internet rewards immediacy. Whoever posts first shapes the initial story, even if that story later changes. The footage, however brief, set a tone that would be difficult to fully undo. That realization led to broader conversations about digital responsibility and the permanence of impulsive actions in an era where everything is recorded. As night fell again, the volume of takes slowed, replaced by longer threads and reflective posts. People talked about privacy, about how love turns volatile under pressure, about how quickly empathy evaporates when speculation takes over. The clip had become a catalyst for larger questions rather than a piece of evidence to dissect. Still, the absence of clear statements kept the situation unresolved. Silence can protect, but it can also prolong uncertainty. Fans waited for clarity, knowing that whatever came next, confirmation, denial, or continued quiet, would reshape the narrative yet again. In the end, the focus drifted from who did what to what the moment revealed. That even the most public relationships contain spaces that shouldn't be broadcast. That pain shared without consent leaves lasting marks, and that the internet's hunger for answers often outpaces its capacity for care, whether or not any rumor proves true. That lesson lingered long after the clip stopped trending. As the days passed, the narrative stopped moving fast and started sinking deep. What began as shock slowly turned into something heavier, reflection mixed with discomfort. People weren't just reacting anymore, they were sitting with the implications. The footage had opened a door no one could close, and now everyone involved, directly or indirectly, was standing in the aftermath of that decision. A major shift happened when viewers began questioning not what the clip showed, but what it invited. Once a private moment is made public, it becomes a canvas for projection. Fans poured their own experiences into Cardi's expressions, seeing reflections of their own arguments, betrayals, and emotional spirals. That projection made the debate intensely personal. Emotions ran high because this stopped being celebrity drama and started feeling like a referendum on how people handle pain when they're hurt and exposed. The conversation around consent grew louder. Many people pointed out that even in relationships where everything has been shared publicly, wins, losses, breakups, there's still an unspoken boundary around moments of emotional collapse. That boundary, they argued, argued, is what separates transparency from exploitation. Once crossed, it's hard to argue intent without acknowledging impact, and the impact, according to many viewers, was discomfort rather than clarity. Others pushed back, saying the footage didn't create harm, it revealed it. They argued that public relationships come with public consequences, and that shielding painful moments only feeds false narratives. According to this view, the video stripped away filters and forced fans to confront the reality behind curated images. That argument didn't erase criticism, but it complicated it, making the discussion less black and white. What added to the unease was how little anyone involved seemed to benefit from the exposure. There was no brand alignment, no rollout, no clear message, just fallout. That absence of gain made the situation feel less calculated and more tragic. People began to wonder whether this was simply what happens when emotions collide with platforms built for instant reaction rather than restraint. Attention then turned to the long-term effects. Fans questioned how moments like this linger long after trends move on. Screenshots don't disappear, clips resurface, narratives stick. The idea that one impulsive upload could follow someone indefinitely made people uneasy, especially those who've made mistakes in moments of emotional overload themselves. As the conversation matured, sympathy widened. Even critics of the upload began acknowledging how overwhelming it must be to navigate heartbreak under constant scrutiny. The pressure to respond, clarify, or stay silent can be paralyzing. That empathy didn't excuse the action, but it reframed it as human rather than malicious. And that shift mattered. Still, accountability remained part of the discussion. Many argued that understanding emotion doesn't eliminate responsibility. Hurt explains behavior, but it doesn't justify crossing boundaries. That distinction became a focal point, especially among viewers who'd experienced similar situations from the receiving end, having their vulnerability shared without permission and feeling stripped of agency. The rumored involvement of Stefan Diggs continued to hover over the conversation like static, even without confirmation. His name symbolized how quickly narratives expand beyond their original scope. Once speculation enters the mix, people outside the core relationship get pulled into a storm they didn't consent to either. That realization sparked conversations about collateral damage in rumor culture and how easily lives intersect online without warning. Meanwhile, Cardi's continued silence began to feel intentional rather than stunned. Some fans interpreted it as strength, refusing to feed chaos with reaction. Others saw it as strategic restraint, letting the noise burn itself out. Either way, the absence of response shifted focus back onto the footage itself and the choice to share it, rather than any alleged wrongdoing. People also began discussing gender dynamics more openly. And several commentators noted how women's emotional expressions are often scrutinized more harshly than men's actions. Tears become suspicion, vulnerability becomes guilt. That pattern resonated deeply with many viewers, especially those who felt the clip was being used to imply fault without evidence. As discussions spread across platforms, a quieter sentiment emerged: fatigue. Not boredom, but emotional exhaustion. Viewers expressed discomfort with how quickly pain becomes entertainment, and how little space there is for healing once a moment goes viral. That fatigue softened the tone of many conversations, replacing outrage with caution. Some fans advocated for a pause, less sharing, fewer takes, more distance. They argued that not every moment needs analysis, and that sometimes the most respectful response is silence. That perspective didn't dominate timelines, but it lingered beneath the surface, influencing how people engaged. What remained unresolved was intent. Was the upload an act of spite, an emotional slip, or something in between? Without direct acknowledgement, intent stayed speculative, and speculation, left unchecked, tends to harden into belief. That uncertainty kept the story alive even as interest waned. By this stage, the footage itself felt less central than the questions it raised. About boundaries in love, about the permanence of digital mistakes, about how quickly empathy erodes when narratives get simplified. The situation had evolved from gossip into a case study in modern exposure culture, and perhaps that's why it refused to fade quietly. It touched something uncomfortable and familiar at the same time. A reminder that behind every viral moment is a human reaction, messy and imperfect, unfolding in real time without a safety net. As the noise finally began to thin, what lingered wasn't outrage, it was unease. The kind that doesn't spike and disappear, but sits heavy in the chest. People weren't refreshing timelines for updates anymore. They were replaying the situation in their heads, asking themselves what they would have done if they were inside that moment. The footage had stopped feeling like celebrity drama and started feeling like a warning about how fragile privacy becomes once emotions and platforms collide. The conversation turned inward. Viewers started admitting that the clip forced them to confront their own digital habits. The times they almost posted something in anger, the messages they typed and deleted, and the moments when restraint barely won. That relatability stripped away some of the judgment and replaced it with caution. Emotions ran high, but they were quieter now, more reflective. Less about who was right, more about what went wrong. One theme kept resurfacing: timing. Not just when the video was uploaded, but when emotions are raw enough to override foresight. People talked about how hurt narrows perspective, how heartbreak compresses time until consequences feel abstract. In that state, posting can feel like relief rather than risk. That understanding didn't absolve responsibility, but it explained how lines get crossed before anyone realizes where they were. Another thread focused on repair. Fans debated whether public harm can be undone privately, or if accountability needs to be as visible as the mistake. Some argued that the only meaningful response would be a direct acknowledgement, owning the impact, not just the intent. Others believed silence was the least harmful option, that drawing more attention would only deepen the wound. The disagreement highlighted a truth with no consensus. There's no universal script for making things right after something goes public. The role of rumor culture also came under scrutiny. Without verified facts, speculation had filled the vacuum and taken on a life of its own. Names were dragged in, motives assigned, and narratives hardened before anyone involved spoke. The alleged connection to Stefan Diggs became a symbol of how quickly tangents become truths online. Even people skeptical of the rumor admitted how easily repetition creates belief. As the days stretched on, many fans noticed how little joy there was in the discourse. No one seemed to be winning. Not the posters, not the commentators, not the audiences. That realization prompted a wave of posts urging empathy over engagement, an unusual turn for a culture built on hot takes. It didn't stop discussion, but it slowed the urge to pile on. Attention returned to the people at the center of it all, Cardi B and Offset, not as symbols or avatars, but as humans navigating a rupture under a microscope. Fans who'd followed their relationship from the beginning acknowledged the complexity. Love that's been public from day one doesn't suddenly become simple when it hurts. History weighs heavier when everyone remembers it with you. Discussions about boundaries became more precise. People distinguished between sharing one's own pain and sharing someone else's. Pause between transparency and exposure, between telling a story and taking control of it. That nuance mattered, especially to viewers who had experienced similar violations of trust. The clip became a touchstone for conversations about consent that extended far beyond this situation. There was also an undercurrent of grief, not just for a relationship, but for the illusion that fame makes heartbreak easier. If anything, the opposite felt true. The pressure to respond perfectly, to protect brands and images, to consider millions of eyes before taking a breath. Those constraints don't heal wounds, they complicate them. That insight softened some critiques and reframed the incident as a cautionary tale rather than a scandal to savor. As the internet's attention drifted elsewhere, the residue remained. People talked about how moments like this resurface years later, reshaped by context but never fully gone. Screenshots reappear, clips get recycled. The permanence of digital memory became a recurring concern, especially among younger viewers who saw themselves in the impulsivity of the upload. A quieter consensus began to form around one idea: restraint is a skill, not a moral virtue, and it's hardest to practice when it's needed most. That perspective didn't excuse harm, but it humanized it. It suggested that growth comes less from punishment and more from learning how to pause before pressing share. What the situation ultimately revealed was a cultural tension we haven't resolved between our appetite for authenticity and our responsibility to protect vulnerability. We want the real, but we recoil when it's too real. We demand honesty, but we punish messiness. The footage forced that contradiction into the open, asking viewers to choose what they value more in moments of crisis. By the time the clip stopped circulating, its impact had shifted from spectacle to lesson, not a neat one and not universally agreed upon, but persistent. It reminded people that digital actions have physical consequences, that trust can fracture in seconds, and that repairing it takes far longer, especially when the audience is global. In the end, the most lasting takeaway wasn't about rumors or blame. It was about care, about how easily pain becomes content and how rarely content becomes care. The story didn't conclude with answers, but with a warning written between the lines. In a world that never forgets, the smallest choices made in the loudest emotions echo the longest. And now it's your turn to weigh in. After everything you've heard, after sitting with the emotions, the silence, the reactions, and the fallout, what do you really think this situation represents? Was that upload a moment of raw heartbreak that spiraled out of control, or did it cross a line that can't be walked back no matter how hurt someone is? Fans are shocked not just by the footage itself, but by how deeply it's made people question boundaries in public relationships. Put yourself in that moment. When emotions are at their peak and trust feels shattered, do you think restraint is realistic? Or do you believe pain sometimes overrides judgment? And where should the line be drawn when two people live their lives in front of millions? These aren't easy questions, and that's why the conversation refuses to die. Drop your honest thoughts in the comments. Not the loudest take, not the one that gets the most likes, the real one. Do you think sharing moments like this helps reveal truth, or does it turn vulnerability into a weapon? Do you believe silence is strength here, or does it let the narrative get rewritten by strangers? If this breakdown made you pause, reflect, or rethink how you see celebrity drama, hit that like button so more people can join this discussion. Subscribe if you want deeper conversations that go beyond headlines and actually unpack what moments like this say about fame, relationships, and accountability. And make sure notifications are on, because stories like this don't end when the trend fades. They evolve as more context comes out. Your voice matters here. Whether you agree, disagree, or are still conflicted, just let it be heard. Because sometimes the most important takeaway isn't who was right or wrong, it's what this teaches us about handling pain when the whole world is watching.